Welcome to episode 6 of intx, where we have career conversations in tech. Today's guest is lead engineering manager at LHV UK, Max Dickinson. Max is a self-taught engineer who went from tech support at O2 to head of tech at Ticket Arena in little over 4 years. After the steep ascent, Max returned to a lead engineering role at SkyBet before working his way up to senior engineering manager within Flutter Entertainment. During this time, his focus expanded to include team management and strategy, which is reflected in the seniority of his positions. So I think you'll be able to bring a great deal of value, not just from your 10 plus years in the industry, but that quick ascension and that kind of feeling of almost being chucked in the deep end, as well as a point of view of being a recruiter and then an engineer, but also a manager. So quite a variety of value I think you'll be able to bring. So I'm happy to get you on. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Luke. It's great to be here. Hopefully we can have a nice, interesting chat.
For sure. Definitely will. So I'll leave it to you then to start from as early as you think. So really just when you began in tech and work your way up to now.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, it was quite a quick ascension in kind of the early years. And there's a huge number of takeaways from that. But I think probably quite a good place to start with this is before I got into any kind of tech-related role, so uni. So I am a university dropout. I did a music degree. You'll see there's a bunch of music stuff around. I enjoy it. I'm just not very good. But yeah, dropped out of uni and kind of was a bit lost and didn't really know what to do, and basically worked a load of really crappy jobs to make ends meet. So working in the call center in the day, working in a bar at night, really just getting by and kind of just existing to an extent, not really doing a whole lot. But it was through that call center. So this was working at O2 on the phones. You know, you've got an issue with your phone, you ring up, you talk to someone. They can't really do that much themselves, but they put you through to the right people. It was doing that. And from there, moved into their broadband support team. And this was really from being on the phones, realizing actually some of this stuff makes sense. It seems to be coming relatively easily to me. So kind of got moved into their sort of second line support and kind of carried on working there really. And this was the first point where I kind of thought, oh, tech stuff, that's interesting. I'd not really had any suggestion earlier in my life that you know, a career in tech would make sense. I grew up in a really small town in South Wales where you did maths, you did English, or you did science. Like that was it. Like there was no other options. And you either left Wales to go to university or you become a builder. It's like that was it.
Right.
Like obviously there are plenty of other jobs available in the town, but you know, we didn't have ComSci as a thing. We didn't have ICT, anything like that. I think we had one lesson in high school where we opened a Word doc. That's about it. So this was there was this whole world that I was just not aware of at all. And then getting into the broadband support, I was kind of starting to learn basically how the internet works. And that's something that I think a lot of, like something that I still use today is like understanding how information travels from, like how we're having the Zoom call right now, like how does it travel from one person to another person almost instantly over such a massively distributed network is actually kind of insane. So kind of starting at that point and understanding the kind of really kind of low level nuts and bolts of it was a really good starting point. And from that role, I kind of got this idea that, yeah, something technical is probably good. And I got myself a new job at a translation company called The Big Word. And I was a localization engineer. And what that role was basically file processing. So if you kind of think about the challenge that a translation company has. They work with clients. The client says, I want to translate this stuff. That stuff could be anything, all sorts of file formats. They need to take that, they need to turn it into a kind of multilingual format, and then they need to turn it back into the original document. So this is where the file processing comes in. Quite often you get files like someone will go, oh, this website, translate that. Here's a bunch of HTML. So you need to be able to process that file. So in this role, my line manager at the time, really good guy, he was a big fan of regex, and he introduced me to regular expressions, and I was just like, wow. So I was really into maths as a kid, so like I was just like, oh, it's like algebra, amazing, it makes sense. And I probably used regex to process files, like just using regex for a good year and a half, and you learn a lot about regex in that time. And like still to this day, like most people, if they see a regular expression, kind of wince a little bit, like, oh, oof, what is this? I see it, I'm like, ooh, exciting. Like, oh, what? Exactly. It's like, what is this dark magic?
Oh no!
Yeah,
I remember at uni for regex, I would just copy and paste whatever Stack Overflow would tell me, and I'd be like, "That'll do."
Exactly.
I don't
So
want
there's a load of really good tools out there actually where you can paste this regex in and it'll explain it. And I remember talking about this. This is years ago. I think when I was a software engineer. And then someone's like, "What? I don't need a tool like that. I just ask you." It's like, "Oh yeah, it's this thing you can like." And so just basically geeked out on regex for a decent amount of time. But there's only so far you can get with regex. Like it has to be repeatable. It got to the point where it was like we wanted to chain together regexes. You need to have some sort of logic in there. And that was where, so again, same line manager, he'd been learning a bit of C# and he was like, oh yeah, try this. So that was kind of the first introduction to programming. This was a massive eye-opener for me. It was like, oh, right, it's logic. Great, that makes sense. And this was kind of back in the day with C# where you couldn't, there wasn't any core.NET or anything like that. You couldn't just run a C# script on the command line. You had to do majority of the sort of .NET stuff you have to get Visual Studio, create a massive project, and that didn't really work for what we were doing. So there was this little tool. I don't know if it's still around today. It'd be interesting to know if it is. But it's this tool called LinkPad where you could paste in some C# and click run, and it would just run. Great. So I absolutely loved that tool. And I was using that to do all sorts of things. So this is where I was starting to learn ifs, else, while loops, all the sort of kind of standard basic programming operators, I suppose. So started learning a little bit of that and started getting interested in it. And from doing that, I got an internal promotion into our automation team. So this was basically doing same as what we were doing as localization engineers, but automating it. So putting it into a Windows workflow system so that we could automate the process of customer submits file, it goes through this thing, it goes out to a translator, they put in the translation, it then goes to review, it then comes back. So all that really was tying together a bunch of C# functions, basically. Now, that, again, was a really good learning experience, but again, only really got me so far. This was where I was like, right, this is really cool, I want to learn this. And that role was actually it wasn't a kind of software engineer role, but it was in the engineering team. And I saw all these software engineers working alongside me, like their job is so cool. They come in, they get given problems, and they write a load of code to fix it. And I was like, oh my god, I want to do that. And this is the first time I'd kind of really seen that was a career. And also then seeing the fact that there was there was juniors, there was mid-level, there was seniors, there was architects. And it's like there's a full career here. And all it really required was, well, actually at the time. So this is I think quite a really important point, and quite an important point in my career. Whereas I was kind of looking at these software engineers, all of them had comp sci degrees, right? And I was sat there, me with my 1 year of music college that I dropped out of, thinking how am I ever going to get into this? And the engineering manager there at the time basically said to me, look, if you can get a .NET certification, then you can get a job as a software engineer. It turned out that was a very large ask, and it was it was quite a significant thing, because because the certifications at the time, they're like, yeah, you should probably take this if you've got 3 to 5 years of experience as a software engineer. And I was like,
Right.
okay, I was like, but I can do this. So what I did is I bought myself C# for Dummies, and I basically read it constantly. So there's a circumstantial thing here that worked in my favor massively. So at the time, my wife, well, now wife, girlfriend at the time, was she was working in Sheffield. We live in Leeds. She was working in Sheffield, and she'd drive past my work every day on the way there, drop me off, and she'd drive home and pick me up on the way back, which meant I was getting to work an hour early and I was leaving work an hour late. And I used that time to read C# for Dummies before and after work, go through all the examples. Once I got through C# for Dummies, I started on ASP.NET, and then started getting onto the exam books, and basically just put in the time, because ultimately learning to code, like, there's no magic there. It is literally just learning. You just have to put in the time and practice and practice and practice. I think I built like a really crappy calculator or something like that. The standard sort of thing that people build as like a kind of just to try what you're doing, what you're building. Like, but you've got to build something that isn't in the book, basically. So it's you're kind of testing that you have remembered it.
What was your
from doing that? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. What was your drive and motivation, do you think, behind putting in these hours? So
it was, I wanted to be part of the dev team.
Yeah.
Like, as simple as that. Like, I saw what they were doing, and I was like, this is, I think it was the first time in my life where I'd seen a career that like actually resonated. Like, before then, I wanted to be a rock star. Like, I was like, this is it. I'm gonna be a rock, like, definitely achievable, right? And like, obviously that was not going to happen. And I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do. I spent a decent amount of time just pulling pints, and it's like, that there's only so far you can go with that avenue. So basically, what I saw was an opening. Like, if I teach myself to code, and I can get onto that ladder, then I was very close to going back to uni, and kind of thinking, like, do I need to get a comp sci degree? Is that what's holding me back? But before that happened, I lucked out. Basically, I got a job offer. I say, look, I did a lot of interviewing, and I got a job offer for a junior dev role at a consultancy. So like, that was a huge moment. It was like, oh my god, I've got this job that you need a degree for. I've how did I do it? Like, have I tricked them? Whatever, imposter syndrome flying in, absolutely. Like, how have I managed this? And I remember at the time, me and my girlfriend were so excited, and just like, how have I done this? Like, I'm onto it. And that was a huge step for me. So like, I kind of see, so this was when I started as an engineer at Blacklight Software Consultancy. I really saw that as kind of like the start of my kind of engineering career. Basically, everything before then was trying to get to that level, to be an engineer. And it was probably about three years worth of kind of gradual progression and learning. The funny thing is, now I look back at that and I just think how wrong I was, like, thinking, oh, I need a degree to do this job. So wrong. And it's not really that long ago, like, but things have changed quite significantly now. Like, there's much better routes than well, not better. There's much more routes, many more routes into software engineering than just the conventional comp sci grad scheme, etc. That is still absolutely a valid route in, and it works for a certain type of brain. But there are plenty of other routes in that work for other types of brains, and also other types of socioeconomic backgrounds that don't necessarily lend themselves to university as well. But anyway, that's something that I guess I have realized more since I've been hiring myself. So then I started as a junior dev, working at a consultancy, which I think, like, if I was to give advice to juniors on what sort of roles to look for, and I can only really speak from my own experience here, but working in a consultancy is such a good way to learn. Like, there's no hiding from the fact that there's a client that has an expectation, and you need to figure out what needs to be done, and you will just get new challenge after new challenge after new challenge thrown at you. So such a good learning experience. The key thing is making sure that the team that you have around you is there to support you, because you don't know what you don't know. You make a lot of mistakes, and you learn from those mistakes, but having good senior engineers around you and good managers, good architects, whatever the structure the business has, that can be a huge differentiator for whether or not a company is a good company for a junior or a bad company for a junior. Key thing is the support structure, basically.
Yep. And do you think mentors play a particularly relevant role?
Absolutely. So I was really fortunate. Like throughout my career, I can like call out mentors at every single stage. Like I've been really fortunate with the line managers that I've had. So learn so much of every single one. And having a mentor that can take you under their wing to an extent, but I think the key thing here is like someone that knows how to put the right challenges in front of you and to hold you to account as well, because you can tell the difference between teams with and without juniors in. Like teams without a junior can get a bit stuck in their ways, can get a bit stagnant. The junior comes in and asks all the questions, and you want that. So you need a mentor that kind of encourages that and doesn't kind of put juniors in their box or anything, like just go do the thing over here. You need the junior to come in and be like, what's going on here? This could be better, that could be better. But then you need a mentor who can kind of guide that, because it's very easy to get excited and go off down the wrong path and learn the wrong thing and learn a lot of bad practice. So there's certain points where you need a mentor to kind of rein it back in and go like, actually, maybe this is a better way of approaching this. But actually a really important point here, like I've been really fortunate in that I've had mentors that have worked directly with me, but mentors don't have to work directly with you at all. And actually in some situations, like my current situation, mentors outside the business can be much more beneficial, because having someone who isn't in the day-to-day as a sounding board is again a really beneficial thing to have.
Yeah, definitely, to bounce it off someone who's not dealing with it all the time. And so then for mentors, is this something you've sought out yourself over the years? Like, for instance, just reaching out to people on LinkedIn and stuff like that?
Yes and no. So I think like in my early stages in my career, I didn't realize people were my mentors until after.
Right.
So it wasn't like an official, like, oh, so-and-so is your mentor, or you will spend a certain amount of time with him. But afterwards I look back and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. This person was 100% molding me, like was kind of pushing me in the right direction. And maybe at the time there would have been situations where I was like, oh, what is this about? Like, why are they like this? It seems unnecessarily hard, but it was, I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, this makes complete sense. Like they put me in that situation because they knew that I'd struggle with it and that I'd learn a really valuable lesson. I remember being on like I was on like a pull request for 3 or 4 days, massive pull request. It was like 3 months worth of work. And I was like, this is awful. Why have I gone through this? And I have never had a branch that has been anywhere near as much work as that since then, because like it was a really valuable lesson. Like the importance of merging little and often, it's huge. So yeah, at the time I was banging my head against it, but now like huge lesson learned from that. So yeah, so like mentors are hugely important, and I think if you're a junior, mid-level, even like this applies to every level actually, and if you look around, you will probably find people who you think, you know what, yeah, they're kind of helping me, they're kind of mentoring me. Like address it with them directly and be like, would you be up for meeting with me on a regular basis and mentoring me? If you look around and there isn't someone, go to your network. Get on LinkedIn, Twitter, find someone who is up for that kind of mentor-mentee relationship. There's actually quite a lot of networks springing up at the moment. So like a few recruitment agencies are doing it, starting to create these networks of mentors. It's obvious why they're doing it, but it's really good, and you can massively benefit from that throughout your career. So yeah, definitely look out for that.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a relevant and highly important point. I'd never really been drilled home the message of getting a mentor ever, and anything really. You'd read about it, like when I was into stoicism and stuff for a while. You'd always read about like mentorship and mentors, but then never in my professional life, never in like personal life or anything. And recently, having done these podcasts and even just listening to more like business related podcasts myself, I just hear about almost every single person is mentor and mentee to somebody above and below everywhere. And I hadn't realized how, it was everywhere. Everyone's got a mentor, you just didn't know.
It's so true, and I think as an industry, we're quite progressive on that sense, and like we love to collaborate.
Yeah.
You only have to go to a conference or two to realize how collaborative we are. But I think it's important to remember, like software, and I mean that as in like an umbrella term for all of the roles that sit underneath it. It's a craft, and this isn't a new thing. You look at a blacksmith, you look at a chippy or whatever. Apprentice, journeyman, expert. What's the last one? Can't remember. But
Master.
basically, master. That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, exactly. So you start off as an apprentice, and the master is mentoring you to learn what you're doing because knowledge is handed down from the master to the apprentice. And then you kind of get into that middle phase of your career once you're kind of you're more than capable, where you become the journeyman because your mentor, your master, only kind of can teach you what they know. So you then go around and you start to learn from other companies, other ways of doing things. So you see this a lot in people's career, like either job hopping, which be careful, or contracting is a really good way of doing it. Within a consultancy environment, you get that by going on different clients. So kind of seeing different ways of doing things. One of the ways that I try and address that at the moment with my team, because I'm building a permanent team. I don't want them all to then be like, oh yeah, go job hop. Is bringing in contractors. You have a temporary contract that comes in, brings in a load of experience. They're like, oh, why are you doing like this? This is an easy way of doing this. Or here's a tool that I've used at another client, whatever. That's a really good way of getting that kind of cross-pollination of experience. And then when you get to kind of further on in your career, the way to go from kind of being capable at something to being an expert in it is to teach, because by teaching someone, you almost like hold yourself to account on your knowledge, and it forces you to really think about, actually, is this right? If I'm about to tell this person that that's the way to do it, am I giving them good advice? And it really makes you kind of double check what you say a little bit. So that's kind of why. And then the other side of it is, as you progress through your career, it's not linear and there isn't a ceiling, right? So it's not like you go, oh, I am a senior dev, I am now the master of all things development. It's like there's so many different avenues. Like you can, like, obviously there's like test, DevOps, architecture, SRE, all these sorts of things. But even like then you go down into it and it's like, okay, Linux, Windows, and then it's like, what all the different programming language, all the different libraries. You can't be an expert in everything. So you're just constantly in this cycle of learning and teaching of new things. And I mean, this is why the job's so amazing. Like there's just this never-ending like path that you can go on. There's always more to learn than you could ever possibly learn.
Yeah, it's like you've got a bunch of stat bars for every technology, and it's like they're always falling because there's more stuff coming and there's more bars, and you're just trying to learn as much. But then the great thing is that to get anywhere, you can have like a little bit of everything or a lot of one thing. There's no one size fits all type thing.
It's just a massive RPG. Like that's all it is. Like and you basically, it's just like in an RPG. At times you've got to grind it. You've got to grind that XP. And you're right. Like there's an algorithm in there where like XP over time does kind of degrade if you don't continue to keep doing it, and it comes back up.
Inflation.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a game there. There's definitely a game in that. I mean, it sounds like work though, so it's probably a bit boring. But like in my mind, I kind of have this view of like, I don't know if you played FIFA back in the day, where you compare the two players and it's got all the stats. Like
that's what I was actually imagining.
Like we absolutely all have that with ourselves, of like different areas and different strengths, weaknesses, and there is no kind of blueprint. This is actually an argument that I've had in my argument's putting it a bit heavy, actually. A discussion I've had in a lot of companies is there's no kind of one size fits all solution to software engineer, DevOps engineer, senior engineer. There's like a baseline that is needed to do the role, but then how you actually do that. So kind of there's a baseline from a mastery perspective and a baseline from a kind of team personality perspective. Like, will you work well at this company? Do you have the expertise to do the job? But then how you actually do that, it completely varies from individual to individual. So the kind of conventional way of looking at organizations of like, oh, we've got 10 of these roles, so this is the job spec. Like, you never look at a job spec that says, hey, here's what you're going to do, but do it the way that you want. If you're really good with talking to people, then go for that. Because the nature of a job spec is a bulleted list of the stuff that we're looking for, which kind of, when you think about it, is a little bit crazy.
Definitely, especially when you go into roles and you realize just how vague these bullet points were, or like how much it varies in a day to day. And I think when you were saying about like the analogy to FIFA earlier, I think it still even holds in that, like how someone fits, because even like defender, midfield, striker, winger, whatever it is, they have like this baseline what you need to do. Defender, it's like, don't let the other team score. But then the types of defenders you get and how they actually link up with other players, like this is all nuanced kind of human interaction and can't really be logically deduced to a job spec.
So it's so true. And like I use this analogy quite a bit when building teams. It's like, look, we've got a bunch of midfielders here, but we don't want all like central midfielder. We need a winger. But we've already got a winger, so now we need an attacking midfielder and a holding midfielder. And it kind of maps to the engineering team where, like, we've got all the engineers that we've got in have kind of met a bar from a capability perspective. But we want someone in that team who's maybe someone who's like a real people person and can kind of work well with the team and kind of make the rest of the team better. We want someone who's kind of detail focused, who can spot when maybe the more kind of creative members of the team miss something. And the problem, and this is kind of getting onto kind of diversity, inclusion, all that sort of stuff. The problem with really just following the comp-sci route is you get one type of engineer. Like, yes, there's personality differences and traits, but they're all from the same background. So what happens is you end up falling into traps where if everyone's from the same background, there'll be things that everyone hasn't experienced. Whereas if you have, like, I really like to pair up self-taught with kind of academically trained, because there's two different viewpoints, and I find they complement each other incredibly well. So like one will be, and actually self-taught and academically trained is probably being a bit too specific with it. It's kind of someone who's analytical with someone who's maybe a bit more experiment focused. Because you need a healthy mix of both. If you have too much of one, like too analytical, you never get anything done. Too experimental, you make too many mistakes. So you need both to kind of hold each other kind of to account and to make sure that you're moving forward, but also not moving forward recklessly. And like it's just how you build teams. It's how, like, the team that I've built now and over the years, the first thing I had to do as a manager and as a leader in any good kind of leadership book or program will teach you, the first thing you need to understand is your own weaknesses, because they're the first people you hire. Like, like you supplement your weaknesses so that you can get the right people in. So the first people that I've hired are all detail oriented people, because I'm away with the fairies all the time. And I need people to make sure that this thing that you're talking about, like, it's complete nonsense. Like, we can't do that. And they tell me when I'm being an idiot, basically.
But no, you're right. You do need that to balance each other out. Makes a good team and makes a good relationship. Definitely.
Absolutely.
And it's illuminating as well just how intricate management really is. Because I think oftentimes people, when they just think of a manager or hiring or something, they just think of like standard job spec. Did they meet the job spec? Did they go to the right uni or whatever? Boom, there you go. But they don't think about all these, kind of latent interactions which are always happening.
Yeah, and the manager job's a really interesting one, because it's one where there is so many ways to do it. And there is no one right way to do it. Like, every single management style comes with downsides. So things that you're blind to, basically. So I guess sort of talking about my career journey, I kind of fell into management a little bit. So I was working at Blacklight, the consultancy. I had a interesting situation where I left and went to another role and realized that was a bad move, and came back. And the big lesson learned there, actually, really just don't take the recruiter's word for it. It is on you as the interviewee to interview the company. And like, if there's one piece of advice I'd want people to take away from this, it is, if the company doesn't get that, it's not the company you want to work for. Like, so like 90% of hiring managers and recruiters treat an interview like a one-way thing. It's wrong. It's completely wrong. Like, as the interviewee, you have just as much say in the decision as the hirer does, and the interviewer should get that. And I don't get why this isn't more of a thing that people talk about. It's something that I think, because of that experience, I kind of hold with really high importance. I do need to think about this a little bit, because I've had a few interviews recently where I've been interviewing people, and I start my interviews by saying, "Have you got any questions for me?" And it throws people, like massively throws them, and that's not my intention. I don't want that. And I need to think about, okay, like, how do I kind of pull that back? Like, 'cause people are like, "Oh, let me tell you about my job history," or whatever, and that's what I want to do, is say, like, no, you're in the driving seat, you're the candidate. Like, I need to convince you that this is a company you want to work for. And I think it's just not a very conventional way of thinking, and it completely throws some people.
I can imagine it, because you're right, it is that, like, a marketing dynamic of buyer seller, and it's like the company is the seller and the interviewee is the buyer, so you have all the power to go in or not. But I think people have this ingrained idea that they need a job. Not that that's wrong, but I'm just meaning they have this idea of they need a job, and they have this scarcity mindset. So they feel whenever they go in, they're like, "Oh, I hope I'm good enough. I hope that I can get it." Instead of coming in and being like, "Right, do I like this team? Am I getting any red flags? Am I even getting that kind of, thing in your stomach where you're like, I don't know," that they need to look out for.
Absolutely right. And I think nerves play a massive part in this. So, like, especially if it's a job you really want and you're nervous about it, it's really hard to kind of go in and be like, "But I'm going to check if you're good enough for me," because naturally you're going to be questioning yourself. It's a really nerve-wracking situation. It's like one of the most stressful situations. So like, that is obviously going to play a part of it. What I found with myself is, like, especially if I've been really nervous for an interview, I'll think of things after. So you kind of go through the interview and you think, "Oh, I meant to ask about this, I meant to ask about that." Like, do not accept that job without asking those questions. Like, go, if you're a good candidate and they want to hire you, like, they will answer any questions that you've got. So absolutely go back. And again, any good interviewer will give you ample opportunity to ask those questions. So yeah, don't be afraid to kind of go back, mull it over. I never accept a job offer when they give it. I always, like, just through habit, I suppose, like, I'm going to sleep on it. I'll be like 99% sure that I'm gonna accept it, but I'm like, right, no, I need to sleep on it. And it's for that reason. It's like, are the emotions getting the better of me? Like, am I just excited because it's new, or they've offered me a salary uplift or whatever? Like, let me kind of go away, let the nerves settle, and think objectively, is this the right move? So yeah, super important. It's a two-way thing. So I made that mistake. Recruiter saw me the dream. I knew within weeks that I'd made the wrong move. The main thing for me was I was just bored. I wasn't challenged, and it made me realize that I need to be challenged. And so I went back to Blacklight, moved into senior, moved into lead. Now, not long after I moved into lead, which, sort of thinking back, it was a tech lead role. I was doing line management for the first time. and kind of recruiting into the team for the first time. But there was also quite a lot of, because it was consultancy, there was quite a lot of delivery related kind of effort there as well. So like helping out with quotes and, you know, project plans, all that sort of stuff. Kind of looking back, definitely should have delegated a lot more of that. One of the big challenges for any lead engineer, tech lead, team lead, whatever you want to call yourself, is time management. There's so much that you could do, but you can't. And the kind of biggest learning for me is learning to trust your team, and to give them the space to help you, but also the right amount of direction when it's right. But yeah, so kind of got into this lead role, and I don't think this was related, but very quickly the engineering manager left, and not that long after the other lead engineer left as well. So I found myself being the only lead, with some very large gaps from a leadership perspective, working directly with the technical director, and needing to fill these roles. So we did a lot of recruitment, and I learned a lot because I'd never done recruitment before.
Was this your first kind of manager job?
Yes, absolutely was.
All of this pressure just came at once. Yeah,
so there was probably, I'm not sure what the time frame was, but it felt like not very long between accepting the job and then being the only tech lead at the company. Luckily, the technical director, he basically was like, right, get my hands dirty, let's work together on this. And he was, you know, talk about mentors, you know, there's another person straight away who was like, right, let's do this together, and that was hugely beneficial for me. So did a lot of recruitment, no doubt. I look back at my approach to recruitment then and just cringe. It was like, oh, give me a bubble sort algorithm, like that's terrible. It's the sort of thing you look at now, oh god, so bad. And like a list of 10 questions that were like, can you explain what solid stands for? Can you explain how, I don't know, like just like theory questions.
Yep.
And I look back at it, I'm like, what? Like how often in your day-to-day does that happen? And I mean, this topic has been covered quite a lot elsewhere, but the thing that made me realize that like this sort of tech test was completely no use was one of the submissions I got for the bubble sort. Came back and I looked and I was like, this is a bit weird. Like it works, but there's a really weird comment, like code comment in there. So I Googled it and I found it on Stack Overflow. They'd literally copied and pasted the Stack Overflow. Like they'd Googled bubble sort in C#. And I just thought, I was like, God, at least delete the comment. Like,
I know, at least change the variable name.
yeah, like literally zero effort whatsoever. I couldn't believe it. But like if someone is going to put that little effort into it, and I think like one of my like I'm naturally quite trusting, which is a really good thing as a manager in some ways, but also you have to be really aware of the downside of that, which is like you can end up creating a process that can be really easily kind of bypassed, or like, all it takes is, you know, someone being a little bit sneaky. So this was like a bit of a light bulb moment for me of like, oh, right, that doesn't make sense. What can we do that better assesses what is actually required for the job? And like that's something that I've been refining throughout my career, and still like, so currently I try and do a tech test. There has to be like, you have to do something, right, to understand someone's technical capability. It also depends massively on the role. Like, so I actually generally only tech test like juniors and mids, seniors maybe, but from kind of senior upwards, it becomes like less critical, because tech tests have to be quite trivial, because you can't expect someone to commit a huge amount of time. So like by the nature of that kind of requirement, it has to be a small thing, which for when you're interviewing for a senior position or a lead position or a principal, like it's like, what's that going to tell you? Like, oh, this person could do a mid-level role. So actually for those people, it's much more about a conversation, because that side of the job is way more impactful for a senior. Like, can you describe a really complex technical thing to me? Like, how would you describe I don't know, how would you describe CQRS to a junior engineer? Like, that sort of thing. Like complex situation, complex model described in a understandable way. But ultimately, it is a complete, like, there is no right answer to this, because either you have to not assess them enough or ask for too much time. And in a recruitment market like it's been for the last however long, you really don't have the opportunity to well, you can't just ask people to be like, oh yeah, spend the next 3 days on this tech test or whatever. You just can't. They will go somewhere else. I think the best one that I've done is invite people in to pair to come and work with you for half a day, pay them for the joy of it. But again, that's quite a large time investment from the interviewer, from the team, from the individual. So that, again, is difficult to do. It's great. It works really well if you've got the time and the capacity to do it. And I've only been in a couple of situations throughout my career where that has been doable. So I guess pulling it back to my career history. So yeah, working at Ticket Arena, no, working at Blacklight Software, I got the job offer for Ticket Arena. So this kind of came about through one of my colleagues at Blacklight was working there, and kind of ended up meeting with the owner of the company, and fully expecting like, oh, a dev job, that'll come of this, and came back like, oh yes, I want to bring you in as the head of engineering. And I was like absolutely blew my mind. I was 27 at the time, and yeah, kind of head of technology, actually, not head of engineering, so even more. That was a huge role, and I kind of ummed and ahed about, should I take this role? Is it too big? But basically, like, fortune favors the brave. If the opportunity is there, then let's do it. I'll give it a go.
Yeah,
I do kind of look
sink
back.
or swim time.
Exactly that. Just do it, basically. I look back and I think, in hindsight, like, I was inexperienced for the role, like absolutely was. And there's a lot of mistakes that I made in that role that I wouldn't have made had I have had more experience. But I've learned it so much from doing it. Like, made a lot of mistakes, but also did a lot of really good stuff. The team, so proud of the teams that we built there. The stuff that we achieved, the new Ticket Arena brand that got released, we achieved a lot there, and it was a difficult environment. Any kind of small company that's got clients at the door, you need to scale with those clients. There was a lot required there. But going into that role, I look back and I wouldn't change it. Like, it was really, really hard. But I wouldn't change it because I learned so much, and the people that I met, the experience that I got was absolutely massive. I think kind of some of the takeaways. Obviously, learned a lot about leadership. Basically, I joined as head of technology, but depending on the day, I was either lead dev, EM, recruiter, CTO, like whatever. Like, I reported directly to the CEO, so it's like you could be doing a different thing every day, and that is actually quite a important thing for anyone sort of considering leadership roles. Is in a leadership role, the buck kind of stops with you. Like, you wear whatever hat you have to wear to get the job done, and that the job done could be literally anything. So when I took the job, I didn't expect that 6 months, 12 months later, I'd be recruiting for a product manager and recruiting for a role that I'd barely worked with, let alone hired. But I knew I needed one, and it's like, really, like, you have to do a lot of on-the-job learning, basically. And we hired a product manager, and he's amazing. I think he still works there now, actually, which must have done something right.
Must have been a good recruiter then.
Well, hopefully. I think that the kind of feedback that I've had in the past is, and I think it really comes back to that experience of being missold the job, is just obviously part of recruiting someone is you do have to sell the role to them a bit, because you want them to want the job.
Yep.
But never, ever, ever say something that's not true. Like you want to say what we're doing. You want to kind of say it in a way that will inspire them, the kind of, what is the mission that we're trying to achieve? It's very similar to what a product manager does that I know now, what a product manager does to inspire a team to build something. You do exactly the same when you're talking to a potential engineer. But yeah, like never blow it up to be bigger than it is, or say something that it is. And actually some of the best hires, and I've almost felt counterintuitive doing this, but it's when in the interview I've said, look, here's the stuff that is broken and that we need to fix. Like, this is the stuff that's bad about here, because then they know what they're coming into, and they're actually more likely to then roll their sleeves up and get stuck into it. Whereas if you sell the dream and someone comes in and is like, well, you didn't tell me about this, like they're more likely to then get jaded quickly. And I've made that mistake, absolutely made that mistake in the past. But yeah, you learn from it. And now, like there's a couple of roles I'm hiring for at the moment where, I'm like, the reason we need someone in this role is because X, Y, and Z needs improving. I don't know this. I don't know exactly how we need to do that. So this is why I'm hiring someone in to do it. I think something that I've learned throughout my career is so much comes down to expectation versus reality. And that's not just in joining a company, it's in everything, stakeholder management. It's one of the, like, in kind of agile software engineering, three amigos. It's the kind of classic project versus product thing, like expectation of the client, expectation of the salesperson, expectation of the project manager, expectations are all different. Yep. So anything you can do to bring all that together is a good thing. So Ticket Arena, really hard work, learned a huge amount, but yeah, really took its toll. And I think this really made me kind of appreciate the importance of looking after your own mental health, because I definitely did not at that company. I think a lot of this was grounded in imposter syndrome. I knew I was young, I knew I was inexperienced, and I didn't want to look like I was failing. But the second you start hiding from the truth and hiding from yourself, it gets worse. So I'd almost tried to like double down on the effort, double down on the stress, and yeah, it massively took its toll on me. So ended up kind of leaving, and I knew I needed something else, and went to SkyBet, which was exactly what I needed. So
what advice then would you give someone in that stressed kind of hamster wheel type situation, trying to combat the, like, maybe an ineffective work by just more work?
Get help, like talk to your colleagues, share the load. Like this it comes up from time to time everywhere. There's always going to be peaks and troughs in terms of workload, and the first thing you can do is kind of acknowledge yourself, like, you know what, actually I'm not really helping anyone right now by not looking after myself. So you have to, it's the classic thing from when you're on a plane and they go through the whole routine that no one pays attention to. Part of it is, if you've got kids with you and the gas mask come down, put your own gas mask on first, because you're not helping anyone if you can't breathe.
Yep.
It's exactly the same from a work perspective, because especially if you're a manager, like you have a kind of pastoral duty to look after your team. So if you're not looking after yourself, you will not be able to look after your team. So you have to, first of all, kind of acknowledge and say, you know what, I am struggling. And then look, right, how can I get help? Don't be afraid. Basically, you'll generally find people around you do want to help you. They want you to be successful. They want the company to be successful. So get help from your team, get help from your colleagues. If you're not sure what to do, like, HR are amazing, actually. Like, talk to HR and they will advise you as what to do. Get a career coach, like take a holiday, all these sorts of things that can have such a big impact. And if it's situational, change the situation. Like that's ultimately what I did at Ticket Arena. Is I knew I needed to change something. I think looking back, I probably could have, like, if I'd have addressed it like 6 months sooner, I probably could have turned it around. But it got to a point where it was situational. I needed to change the situation, so I did.
Yep.
Yeah. If your company has mental health first aiders, talk to them because they will help you. I am one of them, and we are trained for it. Like it's the vast majority of things that people get in touch with you for is, I'm super stressed, I don't know what to do. And most of the people I speak to, like a lot of it is just taking a step back and just thinking, right, okay, how do I handle the stress? Is there any way I can decrease the stress coming in, or is there any way that I can like coping mechanisms that I can find that will help me manage the stress that's coming in? But also the other side of it is then, like, I'm not a doctor, so if someone is actually struggling with, I don't know, anxiety, depression, or anything else, there's an absolute myriad of conditions here. Go see a doctor. Like that was like the first step for me, was I went to talk to my doctor about it because it was affecting my sleep, and it's like, right, what can I do? And that was ultimately the thing that led me on the path to realizing what I needed to change the situation. But it's baby steps. It's when you're in the middle of it, it's so hard to see a path forward because you're super stressed. There's so much going on. It's like, what do you do? So you kind of have to do something to kind of help yourself kind of get that path forward. Definitely.
Yeah. And do you think then also at that high level that it's important to take a step back from the position that most people have of just doing stuff, keeping busy is productive, and taking a step back and being like, right, what actually needs to get done, and prioritize and then attack it?
That's so true. So this idea that like productivity and value equals effort put in is so wrong. Like I describe it as moving rocks. So a lot of people think software engineering is like moving rocks because they'll say, oh, how long is it going to take you to move all these rocks from there to there? But that's not what the problem is. The problem is we've got a pile of stuff and we need this thing over here. Like we don't just need to move the rocks. So if you're doing something unproductive, you're basically moving rocks from one place and back, and then back to the same place, and then there again, and then moving it back. You need to take a step back and go, where do we actually need these rocks to be? And more often than not, someone will come in and go, they're fine where they are. Like, it's a feature, not a bug. You know, it's that sort of thing.
Exactly.
And it comes up time and time again. And you basically see like kind of junior mid-level engineers, or like they'll be working on something. It's like, okay, I need to solve this problem. I've been told to fix this problem. I need to do it. The senior engineer looks at it and is like, oh, no, we can fix that in a better way. Like I can fix that quickly. Then the principal looks in and goes, no, it's a feature. Like, don't change that. It's a feature. Like we don't need to fix that. The most productive person in the team is the one that tells you don't need to do any work. So yeah, this idea of effort, like effort is part of the equation, don't get me wrong, but it's not the be all and end all. There's so many other factors. And I think personally, I just think it's a bit of an old school way of thinking. And this is why remote work works. It's why you don't need to clock watch. You don't need to work exactly 9 till 5:30 every single day, because people given a little bit of freedom tend to work a bit better. You know, we're not all the same.
SkyBet, moving to there.
Yeah. So SkyBet was and still is an amazing employer. So massive step change in terms of size of company, but also in terms of quality and engineering practices. So just going in and on pretty much on day one, seeing their live operations. So I was in the bet team, working specifically on some of the kind of back-end systems that handle the like pricing updates, event status updates, that sort of stuff. So really high throughput. And we had like a really fixed metric that we needed to work towards, which was from someone at a football match clicking, there's been a foul or there's been a goal, that person clicking that button to our price being updated on the site needs to happen within 5 seconds. And this is why if you go on SkyBet or many betting apps and you click bet on an in-play event, it says it waits down with a 5-second count. And that's so the message can get through the system to stop someone at the match going, they've scored, I'm going to bet on them to score, and beating the system. So throughput is hugely important. So how did they manage that? And it's by having incredibly detailed and mature operational systems. So logging, monitoring, the sheer amount of data. Like, I'm a bit of a data nerd, so going in there and seeing it all was just like, wow, amazing, I love it. And then going on call as well, and just sort of being on the hook for when things break, like that's probably one of the biggest step changes again in my career of sort of how I think about writing code. I think when earlier on in my career I used to think about, is it readable, is it performant, does it look nice, and then after going on call, it was all about, if I get called out at 3 a.m. about this, like, am I going to be able to figure it out? Like, have I put the right logging in this to tell me when something's gone wrong? Am I able to navigate to is it easy to find where the bug might be? Like, am I exposing the right metrics? And that really is, it's the kind of shifting to a DevOps way of thinking. And ultimately, like, I tell my current team, it's like building a car and never driving it. Like, that's when the fun happens, right? And you get in the car and you drive it and you see how it works. That for me is kind of software dev versus kind of DevOps, in the kind of holistic view of kind of software DevOps style engineering. So learned so much at SkyBet. Also being surrounded by geniuses everywhere was quite helpful. So like literally everywhere you'd look, there'd be like someone who is like the best in the business at leadership, or like as a manager, someone who knows odds and how match state works, just like an absolute wizard. And like, so basically everywhere you look, there was experts basically. So there's just so many people to learn from. So I loved it, absolutely loved my time there. Moved internally to essentially an R&D team. We were working on replacing some of the kind of core components of SkyBet that was third party. Again, really, really good experience, incredible caliber of engineer there. So like solving some hard problems basically, and that attracts smart people. But whilst we were going, we got bought out twice. So we got bought by Stars Group, aka PokerStars, and then we got bought by Flutter. So Flutter owning Paddy Power, Betfair, PokerStars, FanDuel,
right?
Lots of betting companies. And I'll kind of amalgamate the two because basically I was an engineering manager at the time, and these situations are, as a manager, as a leader, it's basically where you earn your stripes. Like, there's a really hard message to be landed, and so both these acquisitions had a material impact on us as a team. So the product that we'd been working on for the last however many years was being ditched and was being replaced with something else, and we needed to throw away that work and start again. You've got a bunch of really smart engineers who are hugely invested in this, and you have to give them that message. That's a hard message to give. And this is where, so SkyBet again, awesome, put me on a load of training before this happened on kind of delivering hard messages. And that's where all that training came in. So like, how do you include the team in the decision? How do you kind of get them through that change curve, basically? So it's similar to kind of the grief curve, but like, how do you help them kind of navigate through that? Because we were all going through it as well. Like, we were massively invested in it, and we basically had to take the team through it. Now, naturally, some people weren't able to get over it and left. Some people kind of, right, okay, what is the future? What we're working towards? Let's get involved in that. Let's kind of move forward, basically, because that's all you can do, really, is look at what is the new thing that we're going to be doing and get involved, get invested in that, and move forward. But as a manager, it was really, really hard. And it took me a while personally to kind of go through that. And you're kind of trying to help your team through it. And you're thinking like, oh, is this right? Like, am I being authentic? Like, if you're not authentic as a manager, your team will see through it immediately. So you've got to, but yeah, huge learnings there. And ultimately, like the big, really for my last 2 years at sort of PokerStars, it was at that point, was growing new teams. So did a huge amount of hiring again, a huge amount of organizational design, so the sort of stuff we were talking about earlier about, what is the shape of a team, who are the right people, and really kind of refined my approach to recruitment and building teams and what to assess. So I think there's definitely quite a few things that I can, I guess, advice I can give on people applying and I guess all people hiring as well. So it's kind of what we were talking about earlier with the tech test. You know, you've got to kind of weigh it up, weigh what is right for the role. Really understand what is that gap you're trying to fill. And like so it's probably better if I talk about my current company here, because this is where I've basically taken all this experience over my career, gone into a new company. So currently at LHV, it's a bank, probably a bank you've not heard of. We're Estonian originally, but I'm building out their engineering operation in the UK. So completely blank slate. So I came in with no engineers, but we need a bank, so we better hire a team. So when you've got a completely blank slate, it's hard to know where to start. Like it's almost easier when you've got an existing team and you've got like a specific hole to fill. You can be really specific on who you're recruiting and how you recruit for them. But when you've got a blank slate, where do you begin? So my approach to this was like the first thing that I was massively aware of was I need to put some credibility behind this team, because no one in Leeds, where I'm predominantly recruiting, knows who we are. So my first few hires are going to be crucial. So get people that have a bucket load of experience and have a good reputation as well. So like kind of the initial senior engineers that I hired absolutely did that and kind of laid the foundation of the team going forward. I've then kind of started to supplement around that. So now I've got two and a half teams. One of them's kind of split between Leeds and Estonia. And I'm really proud of what we built. I think the approach to recruitment's worked well. We basically focus equally on capability and personality. So are you someone that we think will work well with us? And that really comes down to our company values. And are you someone that is able to work with us, like capable of working with us? I think this is quite an important point when you're building something from nothing, is you have to kind of early on figure out who are we, like what's our identity, and then live it, like absolutely live it. So we've got 3 company values, and I didn't come up with these were there already before I joined, and actually were, you know, part of the reasons I joined, because it was something I identified with. So first company value is no bullshit, and we absolutely live and breathe that. So like we don't beat around the bush, and a lot of this comes from the Estonian culture. They think we're hilarious. They're like, you British people can talk and talk, me especially. But like they're just like, what's the point? Like, why are we here? They joke like every call starts with how's the weather. But yeah, so the kind of no bullshit, like to the point. This only works though if your team is has a kind of grounding of mutual respect. So everyone knows that we all respect each other, we all like working together, and we are able to say if someone is like, there's no such thing as a stupid question, but there's also no such thing as a stupid retort. Like, so someone can like make a suggestion and someone can say, well, actually, no, that won't work, whatever, and kind of encouraging that kind of healthy debate, basically. Second value, agile, kind of goes without saying, but actually when you're a bank, it doesn't go without saying at all. So this is, I think, something that when I speak to people, when I've hired people in from financial services, it's like actually something that we do a little bit differently in the sector. That is a challenge though. Like it's a massive challenge in itself, being an agile engineering organization when you are a regulated organization like a bank. But we won't get into that one now. And the last one, never satisfied. And this is, I'd say this one is, the way that I'm implementing it anyway, is very much kind of grounded on what I learned from SkyBet in terms of their approach to growing their people and to helping them learn and ultimately building a good product. You know, it can always be better. It doesn't matter who you are, who you work for. It's like I was saying, you know, we work in an industry where there's always something more you can do, something better you can learn. So we should live and breathe that, and take that into everything we do, basically.
Definitely. I like those core values, because oftentimes you see on company websites all these core values, and it's like, you know, whatever, all this kind of airy-fairy stuff of how we all
Yeah.
love each other. But no, I like that. That's good. And yeah, I
We
can
we kind
imagine.
of we ummed and ahed about the no bullshit one because so basically it was like that's a kind of direct translation from the Estonian values. And we're like, does that is this like okay
Yeah,
in
are we
the
allowed to put
UK?
that on the website?
Yeah, exactly. But like we're like if we were to filter it down and like make it a bit more kind of enterprise plus plus or
Yeah.
like corporate, like transparency or whatever,
Mhm.
it's like, it just doesn't. No bullshit gets the point across so much better.
Yeah.
And the way we decided, like, if we take away no bullshit, we're not being no bullshit. So
Yeah,
like, so we have to keep it basically.
exactly. But and I think as well, and there's like the way the world's moving as well, I don't think you'll be pulled down with having like a no bullshit slogan.
Mm,
Whereas like, maybe 10, 15 years ago, he'd be like,
mm,
nope. Whereas now you'll have people who will respect it.
yeah,
Because yeah, I do like that, and I can imagine British people joining a meeting with Estonians and they're expecting like the hi, how are you? How's the kids? How's the
yeah.
weekend? And they're sitting with like the mug. It's like this meeting could have been an email.
Yeah, yeah, exactly that. Yeah, they think it's hilarious. It's so
Yeah.
funny. Because they're like, yeah, it's still snowing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Just as cold as every single other day.
yeah,
Yeah, I can
exactly.
imagine.
Yeah.
But all good. And so I think you've covered all of my questions whilst talking about it, which is brilliant. Um, well, one other thing actually, I'd seen it on your LinkedIn. You posted
Mm.
about ChatGPT.
Oh,
It
yeah.
basically had done your tech test for you.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I thought, how do you? Well, the question I initially had was, how do you see that affecting the recruitment and
Mm.
hiring process? But I feel like you've basically answered it in that it's the hiring process is not a logical do or don't. It's
Yeah.
a human interaction.
Exactly that. So we still do that tech test, even though there's a solution on my LinkedIn. But ChatGPT itself is a huge advancement, and I think I likened it in that post to like the boom that we're going to see is equivalent to the introduction of the search engine,
Mm-hmm.
and I think like the recruitment process has to adapt. Absolutely, like we adapted when the search engine came in. There was a really good quote actually from the CEO of ChatGPT, when he got challenged by some schools, saying like, what are we going to do? This is going to like mess with our exams. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to like we have to ban it or whatever? And his response was, "You adapted when the calculator came out. You'll adapt again."
Mm-hmm.
It's just absolutely perfect because, like, as developers, like if someone uses ChatGPT to solve this tech test, that is showing a level of ingenuity and
Mm-hmm.
like creative thinking, because it doesn't give you the solution. You absolutely have to kind of know what you're doing basically to be able to figure out what works, but it gives you a start of a 10.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the important takeaway here is that the actual text submission from the tech test is such a small part of it. It's the conversation you have about it. So we always invite, not always, we mostly invite people who've done a tech test in for basically a peer review. And we
Mm-hmm.
go through and we ask them, why'd you do it like that? And the people who do best in that are the ones that come in saying, oh, I really didn't like this thing that I did. Or here's how I'd like to improve it. And I basically preempted our questions.
Mm-hmm.
Because that shows me that they're like, code is code. Like, it's never finished. Like you're always improving it and adapting it, and like the only real constraint is time. So like there's good for people that are thinking beyond it. Like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for, really.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that's it. It's you can liken it almost to math when you're younger, and the teacher says, "Show you're working," and it's like
Yeah.
what they're trying to get you to do is to see that not just that you know the answer, but that you understand what's happening. And that's where I think with
Exactly that.
ChatGPT and things like that, where, for instance, I think was it like Wharton Business School, I got a B. something like that. And it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, you could go and get a degree now, go and get a management degree. But it's,
Yeah.
well, good luck understanding the reason behind like the marketing moves it made or like recruitment decisions. And it's the same with code. It's, you can have code and send it in and put the pull request in or whatever. But if the lead engineer's like, come and see this, what'd you think of
Mm,
this? And you just look at the code and it's like looking at a foreign language, then
mm.
you're going to be no use.
Oh, you get caught out so quickly.
Yeah.
And I think, people like, this isn't new. Like, Google's been around for so long, and,
Yeah.
people have been able to wing interviews for a long time. But you get found out, like, and even like certifications and things, like certifications are good in some ways, but they are theory. They don't teach you how to implement that theory and when to implement that theory. And I've worked with plenty of people throughout my career who have been a bit too focused on the theory, and it falls down as soon as you kind of hit a real world situation where that, like, there's nuance. Like, so actually, yeah, that thing in that book, yeah, totally, there's some principles that we can take from that, but that doesn't fit this situation. So I'm a big fan of, like, I guess every situation is different, and you like, I've read a lot of like agile books, a lot of management books, and you take nuggets from them, and they are all tools in your tool belt, right? And which ones you apply to the situation, that's why agile coaching and that sort of stuff is such a racket, is because it's really hard to know, like, to go into a business cold, understand the business, and know, okay, what is needed to turn this around, or what is needed to make it more performant. You don't get that in a book. Like, you can't get that in a book. You can get pointers, but it's so specific to each situation.
Yeah. No, it definitely is. And I've noticed that actually this is episode 6, and as I was saying before, everyone keeps talking about mentorship. There's a couple other themes as well, but one major theme that I've noticed is, and even just in my own life, is how you kind of grow up thinking it's all logical, and then at some point it just all clicks, and suddenly you realize that everything's human. And I was going to ask that, have you noticed that when hiring people, that it's experience or age? Because I can't help but feel there's a thing that, irrespective of experience, it's still not until you start to hit the kind of mid-20 bit that you start to go, everything's not a process. Everybody's just a normal person. Interact.
I think it's a bit of both. So life experience is definitely part of it. But I guess job experience is part of it as well. But yeah, like, so I mentioned earlier about the tech test, how I'm less likely to tech test more senior people. And that is because generally, I'm speaking generally, I have to be clear on that, the really hard problems aren't technical problems, they're people problems, or organizational problems, communication problems. And the way that you kind of go from being you hear I hate the term, like 10x, that kind of idea, if you take that concept of like having an impact, just like being just yourself, to impacting lots of people, you very rarely do that with a technical solution. You do that by convincing an organization to take a different approach to something. Yeah. When I moved into management, I realized I used to think computers were hard, but no, people are hard. Right? So much harder. There is, like, computers are logical. They follow a set of instructions. What works for one person does not work for another. Early stage of my management career, made that mistake several times. Like, oh, I managed this person that way. That's great. That's how you manage. That you'll fall flat on your face if you try the same thing with a different personality. Yeah, it's all in context, unfortunately, because that means it's really complex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's all just in the relationship with people and treating them like individuals instead of that kind of cookie cutter thing, which people can fall prey to when they're overly academical and they think that it's like.
There's actually a level at management where I've noticed this, where so I'm kind of at that point now where I can see why in a big organization you do view it in that kind of cookie cutter approach, because when you look at an org structure, it is like that. It's impossible not to look at it like that, because you're looking at such a kind of macro level. You can't possibly understand the nuance of each individual in the team. So I've actually been working on a like a team structural model, which I call atomic team design. And the reason for that is like it's all in the detail. Like every atom is different. It's kind of similar like atomic design, if you're familiar with that context, where a design is built of atoms, molecules, and whatever. But the same with teams. And the reason I do it, so our org structure is drawn out like an organism, because each different team has a different function, it has a different requirement, and it is shaped appropriately for that. And I've done that intentionally to show that it's not just like box, line, but like I say, it's the thing I'm working on. It's absolutely not a thing that is ready, but it's the concept of like the devil's in the detail, basically.
No, that's a genius analogy. I'd never thought of that before. It's like, an organism instead of an organization, because it's like the key word is function. Like if you have like an animal or something, it's like, it's got the head, the tail, legs, arms or whatever, torso, and inside them there's different things which do different parts.
If you were to look at a human body as an organization, you'd be like, oh yeah, so we've got the head, and then all the different teams which are boxes, but they're not. You've got a liver, you've got kidneys, you've got a stomach, you've got a spleen, all completely different, because they have to do different things, different functions. And a company is the same. Like a company that is going to be successful is the same, like, because your sales team is going to be a very different shape to your engineering team, which is going to be very different to your finance team, because they've got different needs.
Absolutely. And another thing is with what's it? Before we were talking about something. I was going to say it was like sales. That was like cookie cutter approaches to things. And you're right, it's like you learn cookie cutter as the kind of base entry. Then you realize it's all contextual. Then if you get such a macro view, you realize actually it's kind of cookie cutter on such a big scale. Because it's the same with like sales. Something which always frustrated me with sales was targets. And it's like, it sounds daft, but I used to struggle to fathom how I can have a target of number of people who should buy this. I'd always have it like in my head, how do you know that this many people need this thing right now? I just couldn't logically get my head around it. But then it starts to make sense when you go, right, well, convincing one person, you maybe have to do it this way and contextualize it and blah, blah, blah. But then when you scale this up to the fact where like you can't even see the individual sales, it's something like chunks of 1,000. You're like, right, well, there's definitely a pattern here, which can be cookie cutted to extrapolate across.
Exactly that. Like once you get to the macro level, it all just becomes statistics. Like this approach works for 30%, this approach works for 40%, this approach works for 30%, and it does actually then become a bit of a cookie cutter approach. And it's like we got a good view into this with COVID and all like the health briefings, where it's like at a population scale, then of course it's all about patterns. Like what feels really unique to you as an individual is happening to 10% of the population. Like so to you it absolutely is unique, and you need the people around you to handle it in a way that is specific to what you're doing. But it turns out that actually it's not unique. which is a bit of a blow your mind moment, but it's kind of the big is the same as the small, and the small is the same as the big. And
we're going down one of these rabbit holes where it's like, we're all just a collective consciousness.
And I don't know how we've managed to end up in an existential crisis, but here we are.
I know. Happy Friday night.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to drown my sorrows.
Exactly. Yeah. That's something to talk about at the pub. But final question for me is, if you could start again from the very beginning and think of the entire journey, what's the main mistake you would avoid or advice you would give to someone? Or give to yourself?
For me personally, like, I mean, if I could start again, like if I could speak to my, I don't know, 16, 18-year-old self, I'd say, forget the music, mate. like honestly, Like it was stupid. Like at A levels, I got a C in music, but I got an A in maths. Like I was like, why didn't I follow that? I'd just be like, what are you doing? You're not going to be a rock star. But then I also look back and I'm like, it was pretty fun. Like so, you know, you weigh up the pros and cons.
Yeah.
But like I guess honestly, like practical advice to myself would be trust yourself, like stop doubting yourself. Like, you know, you these jobs that you got because someone believed in you, so believe in yourself. I think this is something that a lot of self-taught engineers struggle with is imposter syndrome, and it doesn't bring any good. Like all it does is make things harder. And the second you start doubting yourself, and there's one phrase that always used to come back to me, which was failing upwards. And I'd constantly be like, am I failing upwards? Like, is that me? Is that what I'm doing? And the thing is, even if there is some truth in it at times, like it doesn't help you. Like it absolutely won't help you do the job well. So you've got to basically think like, this is the situation you're in now. It's like I was saying before, take a step back. This is the situation that you're in. How do you make the most of that situation? Because in life, a lot of things are circumstantial. Like if you're in a role, then you're lucky to be in that role. That is the current situation. Get your head out of the past, get your head out your backside, and focus on doing a good job. Like, yeah. I still need to give myself that advice to this day, like constantly. Yeah.
Well, at least you'll have it on video. You can watch it back.
Yeah, no,
Well,
definitely not. I just can't.
Maybe change the voice or something.
Yeah, can ChatGPT do that yet?
I'm sure there'll be an open source AI somewhere that can do
Definitely,
it.
yeah.
But no, that's good advice, I think, because yeah, you're right with imposter syndrome. I've noticed that, and I hadn't noticed it until I moved into work, but it is, yeah, self-taught people seem to have the most. And I think it does come from that place of, oh, do I know what I should? Whereas at least when you go to uni, even though you do get a bit of imposter syndrome of, I can't remember what I did on that course, at least you still feel in your head, you're like, I've got a bit of paper that said I've done it.
It's exactly that. And it's amazing, just a little bit of paper, just like, oh, someone else told me that I got this. Like I am good enough. And yeah, it's amazing the impact that can actually have on you. Because yeah, it's the mind is crazy, and it will find ways to convince you that you're kind of faking it, sort of thing. But you know, if you're there, you're not faking it, you're doing it. So yeah, that's
it. You're in the position, so you know, must be good enough for it. But absolutely. Yeah, good advice to end on. Anything else for you to add?
No, just thanks for having me. Been really good fun. Really enjoyed the chat.
No, don't be daft. It's a pleasure having you on. And yeah, that was brilliant. Honestly, the amount of experience and advice you've got in regards to management, you need to strongly consider making a course or something, I would say.
Yeah, there might be something on the cards possibly one day. We'll see.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Well, pleasure having you on, and take care. Enjoy your Friday night.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I need to go see what trouble the kids are up to.
Oh, so not too much of exciting night then.
No, absolutely not.
Watching the kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough. Well, enjoy. Hope the family will. And take care.
Cheers. Thank you very much.